Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Suitcase Club for tonight. We've got a small delay. Our snake man got stuck at a zebra crossing. He can handle snakes, but he doesn't know what to do with zebras. So we're going to start off, and then we might have a small technical break just to get his slides inserted. So welcome to everybody. We're talking about managing snakebite in Sub-Saharan Africa. We're going to present you with 2 case studies, so we can actually start with that. And then the question is whether snakebite management in Sub-Saharan Africa is a basket case. That's just, we broadcasting from the Rosebank Travel Clinic. You know that by now, most of you. For those of you that are new, the idea about the Suitcase Club is to report back on ill-returned travelers. There's Johan now. And so there's no central referral center in South Africa, really, for ill-returned travelers. There's no central database, and therefore there's no real traveler surveillance. So Johannesburg, Rosebank, and Cape Town and Nairobi are the only 3 geosentinels, which is Geosentinel is a global network of travel health practitioners that is co-funded by the International Society of Travel Medicine, as long as Mr. Trump allows them, and the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta. And so this is really an invitation to be part of our network, so to speak, and to report any ill-returned travelers to us. So that's just the website of Geosentinel. You can go and have a look and find out more about it. And that if you've got any interesting travelers, well, all travelers that return with infectious disease we'd like to know about, you can report them to the email address there, or you can give us a ring if you're too lazy to send an email, and then we'll send one of our many staff members to go and help out with that. Samantha helped me put the slides together, and she's surprising me with this one. So this is just a reminder about the ITIT app that is run by the University of Zurich in conjunction with the WHO. And this gives you an opportunity to give your travelers something in their hand. They can go and download the ITIT app. They then report on a daily basis, voluntary, whether they're experiencing any symptoms. And that gives us an early warning system from travelers all around the world. If there's a lot of respiratory disease or a lot of gastrointestinal disease somewhere in the world, this app will pick it up. In return for that, they can go and have a look at country health risks. As you can see on the right-hand side there, there's Argentina, Armenia, Australia. They don't list Lesotho, as you know, it doesn't really exist. And then at the same time, there's also a page that shows outbreak news. Have we got it on there? Yes. So travel health topics and travel health destinations. Then it's my pleasure to welcome here. He's finally arrived. His motor. He drives a Harley Davidson, one of those laid-back ones, not a Kawasaki. So Johan is going to talk to us tonight on this topic. He's a herpetologist, a naturalist, and the founder. I've always wondered about what's the difference between a naturalist and a nudist, but never mind. And the founder of the African Snakebite Institute. He's written several books on it. He's director of the Kokerboom Biological Research Station in the Northern Cape, which is a non-profit company. I'm not sure whether that actually exists because I've never been invited there. But he invites MSc and PhD students to do their research out there. And he's an extraordinary lecturer at the Northwest University, and he's spoken in many places all around the world on this topic. So I'm quickly going to present the first case. On 19 February, this is really what prompted this talk. On 19 February, so not so long ago, we got a WhatsApp message from one of our corporate clients based in Malawi saying that last night, at about 9:30 p.m., he was bitten by a suspected stiletto snake. Now, the guy is a game ranger, so he knows a bit about snakes. So he said he had a bite. Immediately after the bite, there was moderately severe pain, and the foot started swelling. He reported it to his boss. They then put him in a car and drove him 90 minutes through the dark to Blantyre. Immediately, as they were driving, he developed muscle pain, swollen lymph nodes, and as he arrived in the hospital, they immediately started treating him very efficiently. They gave him adrenaline, they gave him antivenom, IV paracetamol, an injection for the swelling, and a series of drips. And by the next morning, which is when he reported this to us, he was much better, and he just wanted to inform us. That's a photo of the foot just immediately after the bite. I don't do feet, I must just tell you. And then that was the foot the next morning. You can see he's in hospital there. The foot is up. And that is a stiletto snake. Thanks to Johan's website, there's a nice picture, and Johan will elaborate a little bit on it, but you can see it's got that nasty little fang on the side, which I'm not dead sure how that gets onto the foot, but be that as it may, I always thought it just goes for the finger or so. But anyway, so that's the culprit. And then he was asked, do you know what antivenom they gave you? I'm not sure. It came in a small box with a brown label and writing. Literally just said antivenom on the side, I think. I don't think it had stated what type of antivenom it was. And those of you that have studied Greek classics, you'll know there's a thing called Pandora's box. So we'll leave that one there. And then the second case was actually, it sort of came to our attention recently, but this is from April last year. It's the same NGO working up in South Sudan, and they reported on a female member of the community that was bitten by a puff adder outside the Boma National Park. She presented 14 days after the bite. No antivenom had been administered because it's not available, and there was only wound management, and the ranger sort of continued dressings for this hand, and that was it. And this is just a puff adder, and again from Johan's website, the distribution of puff adders. So I checked, it's possible it could have been a puff adder, but I'm sure Johan will elaborate on that one. And then the ranger reported, he's a South African, he said, oh, he keeps this antivenom for his personal use. Cool. So obviously it wasn't available when this lady got bitten. He didn't see her then anyway. And we'll say a little bit more about that. And then I've been traveling in Africa quite a bit, but last year I had the privilege of visiting 6 different mine hospitals around Africa. And this is just a quick shot of the antivenoms that I found in the refrigerators. The one on the top right-hand side, polyvalent SAVP antivenom, you will see disappears with a story from the Daily Maverick on the 4th of March. Nightmare crisis, South Africa's National Health Laboratories run out of snake, scorpion, and spider antivenom.
Okay, quite a lot that I want to cover. So let's just see if I can get this thing going. So there we go. WHO reports about 5 million snake bites annually worldwide. And they talk about anything from 80,000 to 140,000 fatalities. Sadly, they very rarely look at morbidity, and that to me is a really major issue. These figures are an absolute thumbsuck. So for South Africa, we report 12 to 14 deaths a year. My estimation is around 4,000 bites a year in South Africa, with about 800 hospitalizations, and about 10% of them need and get antivenom. 12 to 24 fatalities. Again, it's not a notifiable disease, so we don't really have the good data. But I was involved with a very intensive study in Mozambique. We went to one province and we interviewed every single village, and we got data on snakebite fatalities for that village, for that province over the last 50 or so years. And we extrapolated that data and we published it. And our estimation is that Mozambique alone has close on 8,000 deaths a year from snakebite. So how accurate these figures are, I think they are horribly underreported, but we don't have the data. Let's see if Sam, what am I doing wrong? There we go. So the snake that accounts for the vast majority of snakebite fatalities is the carpet viper or the saw-scale viper, the genus Echis, up in North Africa. And that's where we see close on 20,000 fatalities. So these snakes are locally abundant. I've removed 6 from one little shrub in eastern Senegal. And I find them, if there's any garbage around villages, 20 paces from where people are sleeping, if I scratch in the garbage, I find these snakes. They have a really potent venom, and it's largely a lack of medical facilities and a lack of antivenom that are causing these fatalities. So it really is a major problem. If we look at that's this time. If we look at fatalities in South Africa, the main 2 snakes are the black mamba and the Cape cobra. And the reason for that is that these snakes have really fast-acting venoms, predominantly neurotoxic. I'm going to talk a bit about the venoms today. Venoms are complex cocktails. They're not just straightforward. So when we say black mamba venom is neurotoxic, we mean that it's predominantly neurotoxic. I was having this discussion with Albie. I had quite a elaborate argument with the medical doctor who is saying that he doesn't use antivenom because of anaphylaxis. Anaphylaxis is manageable. It's not a big deal. So he just ventilates the patients. And yes, if you're lucky, after 7, 8, 9 days, venom lasts in the human system about 7 or 8 or 9 days. By that time, the kidney should have worked out most of it, if not all of it. But you have other complications and ventilations. But that's not all. These venoms might also contain dendrotoxins, seraphotoxins, myotoxins, and those could affect other organs. So the correct treatment for a serious snake bite is antivenom. It's a no-brainer. You neutralize the venom and the patient goes home. We had a recent case where a snake remover was bitten in the hand. She raced to hospital, driving 200 kilometers an hour. It took her 17 minutes. At 19 minutes, she was unresponsive, and within 3 hours, she was on dialysis as well. She received ample antivenom within an hour of being bitten, and she was non-responsive for 3 days and eventually recovered. So, yeah, these bites are no joke. So these are the two main culprits. In really serious cases, we see people dying in less than an hour, or even with children in less than half an hour. But we had another case where a patient had a suspected Cape Cobra bite and very little symptoms after an hour. And I cautioned the doctors, I said, just watch this patient really carefully, because I had seen instances where the patients crash after 7 hours, and exactly 7 hours later, the patient died. They weren't ready for it. The patient was not intubated and ventilated. So black mambas, despite their reputation, they're actually very shy and elusive snakes. And if they have half a chance, they'd rather get out of the way. An example that I always quote is that Dick Evans in Durban in the last summer removed over 100 black mambas from people's houses and gardens. Over 100. How many black mamba bites did we have? Not one. Not a single person was bitten in the Durban area in that season. So yes, they're highly venomous. They're nervous. They're quick to open their mouth. They will bite if you mess with them. But I doubt if we see more than a dozen black mamba bites a year in South Africa. So it's a problem snake, but it's not a major threat if you don't mess with them. So there you can see the distribution of the Cape Cobra. And these snakes are cheeky. If you confront them, they rear up and they bite quite readily. Very common in communities, squatter communities, where you have rodents and unhygienic conditions. So they're quite a bit of a problem in the Western Cape. And again, locally abundant. We have a snake remover in Montague who last season removed 160 Cape Cobras from people's houses and gardens. The other snakes that have neurotoxic venoms, like the various the green mambas, the western green mamba, Jamiesons, and most of the cobras have this good mixture of neurotoxins and cytotoxins. And we very rarely see fatalities in South Africa from the other cobras because the onset of symptoms is a lot slower. So these snakes don't cause anywhere. Sorry.
Sorry, you're gonna just.
People who say they're waiting to be there.
There is no waiting room, so I don't know what to do. Wrong link, so I can forward the link if they want. Yeah.
Okay. So yes, we regard these snakes as highly venomous, potentially lethal, but the onset of symptoms is not that dramatic. If you look at snakebite management and you take a hospital like Ngwelezan that treats more snakebite victims than any other hospital, the average arrival time for a patient after a bite is about 4 to 5 hours. That's problematic because if it's a cytotoxic venom, the damage has been done. You can't reverse tissue damage with antivenom. That damage is done. So over 90% of bites that we see in South Africa are from snakes with predominantly cytotoxic venom. And the Mozambique spitting cobra probably bites more people than any other snake or highly venomous snake in South Africa. And they have this bad habit of ending up in people's houses and biting people while they're asleep. And they're not being rolled over onto, they're not looking for heat. They are mistaking humans for a meal. They smell a mammal and they bite people as you would in a biting response. And the problem with biting responses is that we very rarely see dry bites. With sort of defensive bites, we often see dry bites. With feeding responses, they inject a lot of venom. So we see a lot of babies bitten in the face, bitten in the eye. We see adults in very expensive lodges in the Kruger Park getting bitten in the face. So these snakes are a problem. Puff adders, we did extensive work on them. And what we found is that if they're hiding, if they're in camouflage, you can stand on them, they don't bite. but they do move around at night and people stand on them. Night adders, strangely enough, they get up to a meter long. They bite a lot of people. No antivenom for them, no real tissue damage, but you do have a patient that needs care for a week or two. And then the stiletto snakes. The problem with the stiletto snakes is they have these fangs that can stick out of the side of the mouth while the mouth is closed. People mistake them for a harmless snake, pick them up, and if you pick up one of those, you will get bitten. It's a potent cytotoxic venom, largely localized, and you have a pretty good chance of losing a fingertip if you get bitten by one of them. No anti-venom for them. And the biggest problem we have with managing stiletto snake bites is that patients are given anti-inflammatories, and that makes it infinitely worse. It just delays the recovery by a week or two. The swelling trebles, and that really is a big problem. So antibiotics and anti-inflammatories in the short term have no room in snakebite management. Absolutely nothing. So there you can see the distribution of the puffers. Albie showed that distribution map earlier on. Widespread, very common, and we very rarely see fatalities, maybe in small children, but in adults we see a lot of morbidity, but not fatalities. And same with those big spitting cobras. We have very few fatal bites from them. Mozambique spitting cobra goes up right up into Kenya, and then elsewhere it's displaced by the black neck spitting cobra. This really is a problem snake. If I lived in the Lowveld, or I lived in Limpopo on a farm or a plot, I would have mosquito-proof doors at all my exit doors. No question. That'll keep them out. We try and encourage people in northern KwaZulu-Natal to sleep under mosquito nets, but it's not that easy. That would also save a lot of problems. Tucked in properly, yes. Correct, yes. So there's the black neck spitting cobra. Quite problematic in a lot of the areas that we do training in Senegal, even up in the DRC, Zambia, northern Angola. And fortunately, we don't see a large number of people getting bitten in their beds by these snakes, but they're large. They get up to what, 8 meters in length, and they are somewhat of a problem. And there's the stiletto snake. Now, the problem we have 15 species of stiletto snakes in Africa, and they go right up into West Africa. And these snakes also have seraphotoxins in their venom that affect the muscles around the heart. And with at least 3 or 4 of the species elsewhere in Africa, we do see the odd fatality. No antivenom, so you are managing symptoms. The best thing you can do with the stiletto bite is treat for pain, rehydrate, and do nothing for a week. And a week later, you start thinking about taking, debriding, whatever you need to do. But if you have early surgical intervention with these bites, it goes haywire. It's a disaster. And that's a big problem for us, because by day 1, the finger gets cut open, and there's a likelihood they will lose that finger then. Worm-stung bites are fairly rare. We see about a dozen a year in South Africa, but we are seeing a fair number of them, largely people tampering with them, snake handlers, snake catchers. The problem with a worm-slung bite is that they have incredibly small venom glands. When I say small, where a black mamba has around 300 milligrams of venom, the snake has 8 milligrams. And where a black mamba needs about 15 milligrams to kill you, the snake needs 0.017 milligrams. So if you have a scratch from a worm-slung, and it's a confirmed bite, and you have antivenom, give it. It could save a lot of problems. Otherwise, you have to wait 4 to 30 hours to see if there's problems. And quite often, by the time they start bleeding, you have a disaster. But we see very few of these bites. As I say, a lot of them are snake handlers. They're tree living, and a snake in a tree poses no threat. No snake in a tree has any interest in biting you. They just go up, up, and away if you get close to them. We must just remember that snake venoms were evolved for immobilizing and killing prey. They have virtually no function in self-defense other than the spitting snakes. That works well. They spit in your eyes, you can't see, and they escape. But we did a worldwide survey that was led by Dr. Wolfgang Buster of Bangor University to see how much benefit there is for a snake to bite you in self-defense. And there's virtually nothing, because just about nothing happens in the first few minutes. You don't have severe pain instantly. It usually takes a while. So for a snake to waste its venom, it's absolutely pointless. So what I always say to people is snakes bite in desperation. They're severely threatened. If they hurt, they will bite. Otherwise, they have no interest. Night adders, we often underestimate their venom. Our night adders get over 1 meter in length, and I see a lot of dogs getting bitten by night adders, and we see dogs up to 20 kilograms getting killed. So if you have a small child with a severe bite from a night adder, you could have major problems. And again, if you rest the patient, you rehydrate them, you treat for pain a week or two, and everything is fine. We don't see tissue damage with night adder bites. A lot of discoloration, but that goes away. Berg adders are problematic because they're restricted to South Africa and eastern Zimbabwe. No antivenom for them. They have a bizarre venom. It's cytotoxic in that it causes pain and swelling. It's neurotoxic. It affects vision. It affects the senses of taste and smell, but it also affects breathing. And in a study of 14 bites over 20 years, every single patient 4 to 7 hours after the bite had to be intubated and ventilated. They stopped breathing. So you've got 3 or 4 hours with a Berg adder bite victim, but if not, there's a likelihood that they could stop breathing and die. So as I've said, these venoms are these complex cocktails, but we generally just divide them into the 3 major groups. So we talk about hemotoxins and worm slung and vine snake. For vine snakes, we haven't had any fatalities in South Africa yet, but we've had a few fatalities further north. Not many, but it's very similar to the worm slung's bite, and the antivenom does not neutralize vine snake bite. So if you have a severe vine snake bite, the patient's going to be in trouble. If you don't have lab facilities and you're not sure, you can do a very simple 20-minute whole blood clotting time test. And just draw blood, put it in the vial, stick it in the shelf. That's the wrong top. We just do this for the photograph. And after more than 20 minutes, if the blood is normal, it will clot, as you see on the right. And if not, it's going to stay liquid. The dominant neurotoxins, as I mentioned, are the black mom and the Cape cobra here in most of Africa. And these bites are really, really serious. The onset of symptoms is dramatic. Within minutes of the bite, you have numbness of the lips. People talk of a metallic taste. The tongue gets paralyzed, so there's a lot of saliva, difficulty with speech. We see ptosis, dilated pupils, droopy eyelids, and it deteriorates from there. The moment the patient gets weaker, then they have difficulty with breathing. And all of that can happen in less than 20 minutes. So it's quite dramatic. But most bites are cytotoxic. And the big trick with cytotoxic bites is the sooner the patient can get the correct treatment, the less the tissue damage. And this is difficult because you can't just get a patient in with a swollen hand and give antivenom. It could be a night adder bite, it could be a stiletto bite. It's a waste of resource. You're risking anaphylaxis, you're wasting money, and it's unethical. And I think ethics is something we really need to give more thought to in snakebite management. So there you can see some Mozambique spitting cobra bites. The problem with the Mozambique spitting cobras is that the SAVP polyvalent antivenom, which is made from the venom of 10 snakes, is highly ineffective. And if you don't give 10 or 12 or more vials within an hour or two, don't even bother. But 4 hours later, the antivenom is going to do absolutely nothing. You have big problems then. This was an interesting case. This young lady was bitten on the chin by Mozambique spitting cobra, got to hospital within 45 minutes. The doctor gave, I think, 12 vials of polyvalent antivenom, and she was back at school 2 weeks later. So this was a really good outcome. But beware, we have this bad habit with snakebite of looking at a single case and coming to some conclusion. It's an insignificant sample size. 1 bite or 2 bites mean nothing. Doesn't mean that it's going to be the same with the next one. And this is a big problem I have with the National Snakebite Initiative. They'll have a bite, they'll do this type of thing, and then they'll say, oh, no, this is wonderful, it works well. No, it doesn't. It's a sample of 1. Rather go to clinical trials and get good data, and then you can... We never know how much venom a patient gets, never. So it might be nothing, it might be a fraction, it might be a lot of venom. That we never know. There's another Mozambique spitting cobra bite. Puff adder bites typically have these big blisters, whereas the Mozambique spitting cobra bites have these bizarre skip lesions. So the guy gets bitten in the hand, and an hour or two later, there's a purple patch here, and a big patch here, and a patch over here. So as the lymphatics spread that venom, these patches So one can, with a fair amount of accuracy, differentiate between puff adder and Mozambique spinning cobra bites. But we've got to be very, very careful of snakebite statistics because right now in South Africa, we have 3 medical doctors that are excellent at identifying snakes. Dr. Miller's 84 years old, he's retired. Dr. Tilbury's 70 years old, and he's 70, only 70s, and he's retired. And Dr. Mark Blaylock is sitting in the middle of Zululand in the middle of nowhere. And they are the only 3 that have any faith in, that are excellent at identifying snakes. The rest are not great. So we're always looking, and the majority of snake bites are poor man's disease. So the majority of people we are seeing that are getting bitten by snakes are from rural areas. It happens at night. They didn't see the snake, and then we start making assumptions. It's not the slide that I wanted to put up, but anyway, let's continue. So the National Snakebite Initiative have designed these flipper charts. They need some updating. There's some of the information on that is really not great. But we are looking at that right now. We're planning a big seminar in November. We're going to have a 2-day seminar, and hopefully by that time we'll have them updated. But you can download them from my website if you can't find them elsewhere. They have 3 different ones. They have a first aid one for paramedics, and for hospital care providers. Please download this. They're really worth having. So something that can really help us with snakebite management is if the doctors are prepared to ask a few very, very basic questions. This makes the world's difference. Age and approximate weight of patient. Location, where in the country, where did it happen? We had a case of a person bitten by a snake in Muizenberg. The doctor said to us, he sees a bit of neurotoxicity, but nothing with breathing. And so he's pretty sure this is burghatter venom, so he's not going to give anti-venom. So I said to him, exactly where was this person when he was bitten? They gave us the locality, and we don't have a record of a burghatter within 37 kilometers from there. So very unlikely to be a burghatter. And I cautioned him, I said, be careful, more likely to be a cat cobra. 2 hours later, the patient needed anti-venom. So location does help if we can get that information. When was the patient bitten? How long ago? We have people, patient bitten by so-and-so. When this happened, it was last Thursday. Well, that's a bit different from half an hour ago. What happened? How were they bitten? We had a case last week in the Kruger Park. A person bitten high up on the arm here, worm slot. So there's no ways in the world that you're going to get a worm slot bite. I said that, and 2 hours later there was a bit of a purple patch. No question, it's a Mozambique spinning cobra bite. And the subsequent symptoms, yes, it was a Mozambique spinning cobra bite. So this information can help us. You don't have to know what snake it is. But if you do know, it makes the world's difference. You know exactly what to anticipate. Traditional treatment. Did the patient have an arterial tourniquet? We have 60% of patients go to a traditional healer first, and about 80% of rural patients have an arterial tourniquet, either a shoelace, a belt, or a piece of fence wire. So we see patients, and I'd say to the doctor, did he have? Yes, he had a tourniquet. Lots of swelling. Did they bring the dead snake in? Yes, it's a brown house snake. It's harmless. Tourniquets cause severe swelling. So ask these questions. Was the snake killed? A photograph? If you can send us a ½ an inch of the body of any snake, we can tell you exactly what it is. So we don't have to see the head. The better the photographs, the more accurate we can be. But if we know where it was, so if you say to me, the snake was in hoodspruit, I know exactly what occurs in hoodspruit, every single species. If you tell us that it was mafeking, we know exactly what occurs there. We have 200 years of data. We have accurate distribution maps for every single snake in Southern Africa. We have good data for the whole of Africa. Where in the body was the patient bitten? Was it a hand, a foot? Did they stand on it? Did it happen late afternoon, early evening? Some snakes are crepuscular. They're only active late afternoon and early mornings. Others are largely diurnal, like black mambas. But we have 3. But a black mamba can be hidden and disturbed. And it'll move at night if you disturb it. And then people get bitten. Was the bite through clothing? Up to 60% of snake venom can be absorbed through jeans, provided you're wearing Levi 501s, of course. So that makes a difference. Was it the clothing? Wasn't it? Was it a shoe? The high-tech shoes, these fancy things that we wear, the Gore-Tex, snake fangs slide through them. They do absolutely nothing. The only shoe that really keeps venoms out is leather, nothing else. What first aid measures were applied? This is really important because more often than not, people do all the wrong stuff. Any previous bites or exposure to venom. So a person that has worked with snakes for the last 5 years and never been bitten inhales venom all the time, every time they clean a cage. So they are very often hyperallergic to snake venom, even though they've never had a bite. If they've had previous bites, I had as a 16-year-old, I had a night had a bite that was minor and nothing happened. I worked at Transvaal Snake Park 4 or 5 years later. I had a snutter night had a bite, and I went into anaphylaxis. I was hospitalized. I couldn't breathe because of that previous exposure. So you can become hypersensitive through exposure to that venom, but there's no guarantee. You never know which way these things go. Okay, where are we here? This is not exactly where I wanted this. So those are all things that you can look out for. We'll have, so this is really when you get the patient hospitalized. Are there symptoms, minor swelling, local, progressive swelling? Progressive swelling more than 10, 15 centimeters in our upper limb is a really good indication that the patient needs antivenom. Bruising or blistering at the site of the bite, bleeding from the fang punctures. Pufferer venom, although it's cytotoxic, also has hemotoxins. So if you look at, if you have a suspected pufferer bite 2 days later and you look at the platelets, you're going to see a massive drop. And what we find bizarrely with pufferer bites, we can give antivenom 2 days later and those platelets just reappear. It's just incredible. But with cobra and mamba bites, 2 days later is a bit late. Ptosis, dilated pupil, muscular fasciculations, especially in the calves. We see that in black mamba bites, but not Cape cobra bites. Difficulty in breathing, drop in SATs. So by the time you see a drop in SATs with a neurotoxic bite, it's already very, very late. Your patient's in trouble. So what we do early on, if we don't see severe signs of neurotoxicity, a simple pulmonary test, let them exhale, measure it, and do it again in half an hour. And if you can see, this patient's getting weaker. They can't do what they did earlier on. So that will preempt severe symptoms. Lab works, do they send the blood off for analyses? Very often they'll say to me, yes. What does it say? Oh, we haven't looked at it. So there you go. Initial assessment, low risk. You can discharge in 6 or 12 hours. 4 out of 10 patients that are hospitalized after a snake bite have 0 symptoms. Nothing. It's often a harmless snake. It's often a dry bite. It's often a rat or a thorn. Was it not? They heard something. They weren't sure. Medium risk, at least 24 hours. And don't hospitalize your patient and forget about your patient. I've seen more than one case where they put a patient in a general ward and they go back an hour later and the patient's dead. So keep an eye on them. High risk, you have a lot of work to do. So this is not that clear. I'm going to have to up the LB, I'll send you this and you can distribute it. But basically, if you're looking at painful progressive swelling, initially, if it's just a hand that's swollen, it's no big deal. If you have no idea what the snake was, you want to look at that progressive swelling more than 10, 15 centimeters an hour. As far as progressive weakness goes, if there's a drop in SATs, if there's a lot of saliva coming out of the mouth, ptosis, the droopy eyes, the dilated pupils, your patient's in trouble. And then with boomslang, we had a case recently where we monitored the patient very carefully, confirmed boomslang bite, and with the first problems we picked up were 34 hours later, and the patient needed antivenom. So with a boomslang bite, at least 36 hours. The correct treatment for serious snakebite and venomation is antivenom, but the patient, it has to be necessary. 1 out of 10 patients that are hospitalized in South Africa receive antivenom. 9 out of 10 don't need it. Consent, obviously, transfer your patient to a resuscitation area, 2 IV lines. We are pre-medicating with 0.25 milligrams of adrenaline because it is said that this might help prevent the rapid onset of adrenaline, of anaphylaxis. Dr. Westhuizen did a study on 51 bites, and he found in that study that this does nothing, but we still do it. So let's continue that until we have better evidence that we don't need to. Food bolus of 20 milligram per kilogram. So I just want to wait for Albie to get back because he needs to hear this. If we, it's no indictment on Albie, it's being kind. If we are going to give a patient antivenom, we do it via saline drip and we do it over half an hour. So nice and slowly, nice and gently. We have the adrenaline ready. We anticipate anaphylaxis. How many patients go into anaphylaxis with SABP antivenom? 4 out of 10. 4 out of 10. We had one study with 7 children and 7 out of 10 went into anaphylaxis. 7 out of, because the batches vary. The quality is not consistent. So we give it slowly and gently. And the moment your patient goes into anaphylaxis, you stop the antivenom immediately. But you can stabilize the patient and start again. And what we find is that with patients that have gone into anaphylaxis on the second round, they have far less problems. So the second time round, it's a lot easier than the first time round. If you're going to give polyvalent antivenom for let's say a pup at a bite, the minimum dosage should be 5 or 6 vials, never less. And we consistently have doctors giving 1 vial of antivenom. And I always say you could rather give the patient an ice cream, because all you can do is confirm anaphylaxis. 1 vial does absolutely nothing to neutralize the venom. I'm going to talk about the different antivenoms, but if you're using the Pan-African Premium, the new imported Indian antivenom, that's a Section 21 antivenom, you double your dosages. So you're also doubling your expenses because they cost the same per vial, but you need twice as much. But I'm going to get back to that. Black mamba bites, Cape cobra bites, even Mozambique spinning cobra bites, ideally 10 to 12 vials for a start, no less than that. If it's Panaf Premium, you're going to start with 20 vials at least. For worm-stung bites, we usually give 2 vials, so they're 10 milliliter vials. The polyvalent antivenom and the worm-stung antivenom must be refrigerated, and it lasts 3 years in the fridge before it expires. Panaf is lyophilized. You have to keep it below 30 degrees, so you don't have to refrigerate it, and it lasts 4 years. So you have an extra year before the expiry of that. You might have to repeat antivenom if it's necessary, and monitor your patient very, very carefully. And a fair number of patients get a bit of serum sickness about a week or 2 after the bite, after the administration of antivenom, which you can manage with steroids and antihistamine. It's not a big deal, but we see that fairly often. So our polyvalent antivenom is made from the venom of 10 snakes, and there they are. It's becoming very complicated because historically, SABP got their forest cobra venom from East and North and West Africa, because we had 1 species of forest cobra. Now we have 5 species. So we don't quite know if the West African forest cobra venom has any neutralization on our forest cobra. So we really need to do a lot more work on antivenoms. This really is majorly problematic. So let's talk about antivenoms. So SABP at the moment are busy with the refurb. They don't have antivenom. They have 0 stock, but they've pretty much had very close to 0 for the last 3 years. It's been a big problem. Veterinarians for 3 years have not been able to buy antivenom. We've had dogs, hundreds and hundreds of dogs dying. And suddenly the market is flooded with antivenoms. Everyone is bringing in what they feel like, and the Indian marketers are brilliant. They know how to sell. So these are some of the antivenoms that are here at the moment. Equitab, Inoserb, Vins. None of these antivenoms have been subjected to clinical trials. None of them have good published data. None of them have any WHO endorsement. And with some of these antivenoms, like Vins, for instance, if you're going to use in a black mamba bite, you need 80 vials to start. 80. My recommendation, don't touch any of these. Don't even go near them. But sadly, no matter where we are in Africa, we see these antivenoms in hospitals. It's a mess. It really is majorly problematic. So obviously we prefer SABP, despite the fact that there's a high instances of anaphylaxis. Hopefully with the refurb, I have no idea what's happening with the refurb, but hopefully if they put our antivenom through 1 more purification process, they can probably eliminate anaphylaxis. But that's for them to decide. So this is the polyvalent, the one that covers the mambas, the cobras, the 2 big adders, as well as the rinkels. For the wormslug, we have a monovalent antivenom. It's a schedule 4, whereas the others are schedule 2. And 2 vials of these, if given early, are really, really effective. So just some of the myths. The first line of treatment for significant envenomation from a highly venomous snake is antivenom. There's no question about that. The dosages, 5 or 6 to start, and you might want to increase that. Antivenom does not reverse the early effects of cytotoxic swelling. So this is a problem, because the moment you get bitten by a spitting cobra, your arm swells up, you get to the hospital 2 hours later, the damage is done. Antivenom is not going to undo that damage. And then we wait and we see what happens to see how severe the necrosis is and at what stage surgical intervention might be required. When does antivenom not work? Usually because of inadequate dosages, the wrong species, or a delay in administration. If it's necessary, the sooner you give it, the better, and in adequate amounts. You can't give too much antivenom. If you give a little bit too much, you waste a bit of money. But if you look at an average snake bite without surgery costs about 100,000 rand to treat. Antivenom is a small part of that. It's minor. A bad snake bite where there's some surgery involved costs over 1 million rand to treat. So it's not a cheap thing to. So antivenom safety, anaphylaxis, 24 to 45. One of the very positive things about Pan-African Premium is all the cases that we've used it, and we've had a number of cases recently, no anaphylaxis yet. Nothing whatsoever. Prophylaxis against anaphylaxis, we're giving that adrenaline. Very, very important. The steroids and antihistamine does absolutely nothing to prevent or treat anaphylaxis. Absolutely nothing. So they have their place in the long term, but in the short term, they do absolutely nothing. Some of the other myths: prophylactic antibiotics and the NSAIDs are not indicated, certainly not in the short term. They can make things worse. The venom persists in the body for about 5 to 7 days. When we say that less than 25% of cytotoxic swellings require surgery, we're talking of debridement. It's not very, and ideally, don't rush into any form of surgical intervention. 5 to 7 days before you start that. Earlier surgical intervention really is problematic. Compartment syndrome. It is very uncommon and mostly unnecessary. Dr. Darrell Wood did extensive work on this. He published it. He did striker needle tests. He did ultrasonic sound, and he found that in about 99% of cases that they saw guilazan, fasciotomies were not necessary. It's not a common thing in snakebite. Yes, if it's necessary, you do it, but largely it is not required at all. So the guy in the middle was bitten on both hands by a stiletto snake. He had a double fasciotomy. There's no ways that you need a fasciotomy for a stiletto bite. The guy on the right was bitten by a stiletto on a finger, and they did that. You can see it's clean muscle. It's unnecessary. Don't do it unless it's absolutely necessary. We've developed over 400 of these posters. They're all free downloads from our website. Every major town, city, region, game reserve, province. And if you don't have one for your area, if you let me know, it'll be on the website within 24 hours. And they're free. You can download them. You can use them if you want one for any. So when we do our corporate training, we do training in 19 African countries. The day after we return from the training, the mine gets a poster like this with their logo and their snakes. And they're free. It's a free resource. Our app has had over 400,000 downloads, and it's growing at a ridiculous rate. It's called ASR Snakes, and it's free. It has myths and hoaxes. It has profiles for snakes, spiders, and scorpions. Local snakes, anywhere in South Africa, you can press on local snakes. It'll tell you what snakes occur there. It has over 800 snake removers countrywide and a whole bunch of other resources. And there's just some of my books and stuff that I've done. And I'm done, Elby. Can I go home?
No.
That was wonderful.
Sam,
Thank
can you put us back to the rest of our slides? But while that, so really, we just want to talk about the 2 cases. I don't know whether you touched on.
No, I haven't.
Apologize.
No, the stiletto bite, as far as stiletto bites go, and in the last 10 years, I've had over 600 of them. That was a very mild one, unfortunately. But with stiletto bites, you treat for pain, you rehydrate the patient. It's very important, lots and lots of liquids, because as I said, the kidneys work the venom out within 6 or 7 days. Then there's no venom left. But you still might be sitting with tissue damage or other damage, but it's not a venom issue. So slight elevation, because the pain really is unbearable. And you, yeah, I don't like, when you've got snake venom in your body that's hammering the kidneys, I don't like unnecessary drugs doing further, making the kidneys work even harder. So don't do it. Just rehydrate your patients and make sure that you don't, on a stiletto bite, you do not want surgical intervention within 6 or 7 days. Absolutely, because on day 3 sometimes you have these massive big blisters, and by day 7 they're gone and a full recovery.
Thanks. So that's why this case. So we try and train our corporate clients to, if you've got a medical problem anywhere, phone us first. And I think this case just demonstrates where we got told the next day, and by then the damage is done.
Of course,
because now, first of all, he drove to Blantyre in the dead of night with a good chance of running into a cow or something and getting killed on impact for a snake bite that wasn't that important.
Yeah.
Anyway, now you don't know that when it happens and you're sitting in the jungle, so you want to get out. But be careful about overreacting in a way. Then he gets to hospital and he gets some unknown antivenom. And we know there's no antivenom for stiletto snake.
Nothing.
Now because he's a ranger, he fairly accurately identified it as a stiletto snake. So it's not a great unknown.
Yeah.
And there was no major reason from everything you mentioned to give him a polyvalent for neurotoxic, cytotoxic. We know that the stiletto snake is not going to benefit from it, and he's got no idea what he got put into his body in the first place. And then on top of that, so the paracetamol probably is fine, but what is an injection for swelling might very well have been an intravenous NSAID.
They make it worse.
And a series of drips, so that's not a great idea. So that's really why I wanted to bring this case, because it sort of illustrates you have a bite, you have an incident, and you do everything that's wrong.
Yes.
And could have done harm. And then we were a little bit, shouldn't we fly the guy out? And one of the reasons was to fly him out would have been to make sure that he doesn't get a fasciotomy from an overtreated.
Or more antivenom.
Yeah. So now I ended up phoning Johan from standing in Plettenberg Bay at Nick's place saying, Johan, and it was a discussion, and you'd seen the photos. Yeah. And so we said, well, it's really not that. So the advice to the client really was get in your car and go back to your camp and just keep us posted. But we didn't want to keep him in the hospital so he doesn't get unnecessary stuff.
I'll be with scorpion stings, with the parabuthids. You can't use the opioids because they don't work. You don't want to suppress breathing. We always advise paracetamol tablets for intravenous, but the paracetamol tablets do absolutely nothing. But people like tablets.
No, so they feel good.
So what is the best analgesic for
intravenous paracetamol?
Yeah.
And it's unbearably painful. Parabuthids granulatus is they don't even want a doctor near them. They cannot bear the pain. And if you give antivenom, which is now not available, it's going to take 8 to 12 hours to start working. It's a very, very inefficient antivenom. It's a very poor product.
Okay, and then this one, which I just put it in because it illustrates the dilemma of the absence of antivenom in Africa. And unfortunately I missed out a bit on your comments on the antivenom situation, because that to me, 20 years ago, I heard from the Warrels in Thailand that this is a neglected tropical disease and we've got a problem and we don't have enough antivenom. But I think this last year of seeing all the antivenoms on shelves. Yeah. Now, that article in the Daily Maverick that I sent on to everybody who got invitations, it specifically mentions the one antivenom that I've got in the fridge there, the FAV Africa.
I spoke about that. So the Indian antivenoms, just a very quick summary, the Indian antivenoms, except for Pan-African Premium, which now has WHO approval, we don't have clinical trials. We're still relying largely on manufacturers' recommendations. We have a long way to go with it, but the early signs is that it's looking quite nice, although we found that with root-cause bites of dogs, with SABP, more dogs survive than with Panaf. So we early days. The rest of them with VINs for a black mamba, and I mentioned that for a black mamba bite, you need 80 vials and none of those None of those other antivenoms have clinical trials, published data. It's purely manufacturers' recommendations. We don't know what species they use. We don't know where the venom comes from. I don't think they know where it comes from. I will not touch any of the other antivenoms ever. But with Pan-African premium is all we have right now. It's Section 21. So you've got to jump through the hoops. It's widely distributed now. The state hospitals have it. The whole Netcare group has bought into it. But it's still early days. We still, it's looking good, but it's early days. We still, the problem, as I mentioned, with an antivenom being given to a patient, it's an insignificant sample size. We don't know how much venom the patient had. So we have patients that don't need antivenom. They have a green mamba bite. We had a case in the Lowveld, snake handler, bit by green mamba, gets to the hospital in 20 minutes. They convince the doctor that it's a highly venomous snake. He gets 12 hours of polyvalent, goes home the next day and it was wonderful. Did he need it? Did we see blood works? No, we didn't. Probably didn't need it.
And the analogy for that is, because I gave a talk to a corporate client this morning about malaria, is people who don't take malaria prophylaxis get a flu-like illness, pop 3 fancy dose that we know is totally useless, and feel wonderful the next day and say treatment is better than prophylaxis because it works, because they never had malaria in the first place. Dry bite.
Homeopathic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Something about Rinkos.
Yes.
Because Rinkos are in Johannesburg.
Yeah.
Albie has it in his kitchen.
He knows.
Apparently.
Yeah.
He told me it's not a wrinkles until it stood upright.
So Rinkos, we haven't had a fatality in nearly 50 years. It's not a big deal. We see a few bites.
That's just because I have a strong heart.
We see a few bites. Rinkos are very quick to disappear down a hole. The problem is that dogs corner them and dogs get bitten all the time. We see a lot of dogs dying. We see very few bites in humans. We see largely cytotoxicity. I don't know of a single Rinkos bite where we needed to intubate a patient. So it's largely a cytotoxin. And it makes sense because if a snake spits, it doesn't want to spit a neurotoxin. It wants your eyes to burn instantly. Spit a neurotoxin, your eyes aren't going to burn. So Rinkos aren't a big deal. That's small child bitten, yes, they'll need antivenom, they'll need to be hospitalized. Anyone will need to be hospitalized, but it's the least of our problems.
Okay, now just on this one again,
Yes.
because now we don't have the photo up again, but that antivenom that the ranger keeps for himself comes from Costa Rica.
Yeah,
What is that?
that's
Yeah.
insane. Well, first of all, no ranger should be using antivenom. If he's going to use Equitab, he's going to need 12 to 20 vials. Does he have 20 vials with him? Or does he have a
I'm sending him this talk afterwards. So
Please do.
So Equitab is widely available in Swaziland.
Yes, but
Okay.
it's not a 21 here.
No.
Yeah.
And there was a review of the plant that produces it.
Yeah,
But some years ago.
2 years ago, they tested that, compared
Yeah,
it
and
with
they did
SAVP.
not pass their review some
Correct.
years ago. I
Yeah.
think they've upgraded.
Yeah, they have,
I don't
but
know
again now,
what
if you have a manufacturer that's adding stuff all the time and we don't know what's going on,
Yeah.
and there's no published
So
data, what do
it's
we believe?
So it's not accepted by WHO.
No. So it's being used in Swaziland, in
Yeah.
Eswatini,
Yeah.
apparently with really good results. They say they didn't have a fatality last year. Is that
And
because of the
that's what-
antivenom? Who knows?
Yeah.
Publish the data. Without published data, we have no idea.
But it's-
People have all these anecdotes.
It's not
My neighbor uses homeopathics. He looks great. But publish the data.
And then one of the other problems I noted, which I didn't really want to put it on here, but one of the clinics has got a protocol for the use of antivenom. But the antivenom on the protocol and the antivenom in the fridge is two totally different
Yeah, that's problematic.
antivenoms. So there's a major problem.
Major problem. So back to that previous slide with the 3-4 days after a snake bite, you are dealing with wound care. You're not dealing with snake bite. The venom has done its damage, and you're dealing with wound care. So it's not puffer bites. We still use antivenom 2 days, maybe even 3 days, and we could see it on the platelets. It's quite bizarre how well it works. But on cobras and mambas, by day 2 or 3, it's very unlikely that there will be any benefit. Be very careful with neurotoxic bites. Cape Cobra victims that get to a hospital quickly and get ample antivenom can remain unresponsive for more than 18 hours. So they've had the antivenom, it's done its job as neutralizing the venom. They're totally unresponsive for the next 18 to 20 hours. And then they start recovering.
And dog bites.
Dogs die from a mamba bite.
Can you just talk a little bit about treatment in dogs?
Very easy.
Very common.
Your dog gets bitten by a snake, you go to a vet, and if it's a serious bite, it needs antivenom.
Very common.
Go to a vet, get the antivenom, get ready for a 20 to 30,000 rand bill, and your problem is solved. Without that, if your dog survives, it's not because of anything other than the fact that it didn't get enough venom. So it's and there's no first aid for dogs. You can't mouth to mouth a dog. They all have different shaped faces. The majority of vets don't even have ventilators because it's so problematic. So I deal with a lot of major clinics, and at Valley Farm, we see a lot of dogs up to 6, 7 a day. Half of them with antivenom survive, half of them with antivenom don't survive. Depends how long it takes to get the dog there. So Cape Cobra bites, black mamba bites, the dogs die really quickly, and bizarrely, Rinkhals bites, they die really quickly. Very, very quickly.
Better watch out for your little.
I mean, you buy another dog.
Will choke on them.
You buy another dog. It's not a big deal.
Thank you, Johan. Okay, it wasn't nice having you, Johan. So the last pressing question is, what do we do about the situation with antivenom not being available? I'm hoping that there's a beneficial, rich donor out there that wants to sponsor this, but you disheartened me a little bit. But I said, how many millions do we need? And you said, how many billions?
A few 100,000. No. Seriously, if I want to start an antivenom unit today, I'll probably need 800-900 million rand to do the basics. And remember that if you're going to run 50 horses, you need a vet, you need grooms, you need food, and you need the immunization process is 9 months. If you mess up in those 9 months, you start from zero. So you can't quickly make antivenom. I don't have an answer because, how do we fix Eskom? How do we fix the roads, the waterworks, etc.? So I really don't know where we're going with this. Pan-African Premium has now applied for registration. So maybe very soon it won't be a Section 21, it'll be freely available. I've spoke with the manufacturers in India, and I asked them, how can your product cost 2,500 rand a vial in South Africa, but it's $50 in Zambia? And they said it's the local agents can do what they want to. We're not really interested. So we are being ripped off in South Africa. We are paying double what the Zambians are paying for exactly the same product. That we should put pressure on and get them to sort that out.
There's a question.
It's back to more of a clinical question. You were saying you keep giving the venom until the patient starts to show signs of improvement.
Yes.
But how do you know with Cape Cobra?
The Cape Cobra is difficult. If you're going to give your 12 vials for a black mamba Cape Cobra bite, and your patient is intubated and ventilated, monitor them and keep them there and wait to see.
You give the 12 hours.
At least, not 24.
Okay.
Yes.
If you
yes, absolutely. But with cytotoxic bites, you're not going to see progressive swelling. If that swelling is extending 10, 15 centimeters up a limb, and you give adequate antivenom, you're immediately going to slowly see the spread of the
Swelling.
progressive swelling reduces, and the swelling starts going down.
So let me say something about the antivenom. So snake bites were made a neglected tropical disease at WHO some years ago, and I'm part of that group. So I don't treat snakes, and I'm quite terrified of them, but I'm very passionate about patients accessing the right treatment. In terms of SAVP, they had an excellent product. I mean, there were some issues,
Absolutely.
but they neglected the plant for many years, and we are now seeing the results of that.
Correct.
So the decision was to, start not from scratch, but to put some effort into it. The processes are slow, and it's not being well managed. They should have built up a stock, and there were many, issues, power and what. It's not acceptable. They have started on it, and you have to push the process. Otherwise, they fall into the cracks of the ordering and all the issues around the state section.
I've tried to speak with SAVP for the last 3 years, and I've just been lied to. We've spoken to everyone.
I work there, so I can knock on a door, but there's never any.
And we've just been lied to. We've heard the Minister of Health on television saying there's no shortage. And the same day I phoned them and they said, sorry, we don't have stock.
There is a major problem.
Yeah. No, we realise that.
It will now be addressed. I don't know.
And I'm not going to apologise for being critical. We're putting pressure on them.
Absolutely.
Because it needs to be sorted out.
Absolutely. The life-saving project.
Absolutely, no question. And it's a social responsibility.
Absolutely. And it needs to be a notifiable disease in South Africa, because then it.
Well, that's one of the next steps. Yes, absolutely. There's another issue that we don't that I haven't even mentioned. I received now in the snakebite season, on average 1 to 4 phone calls a night between midnight and sunrise from a medical doctor with a snake bite that has no idea what to do.
At least they're phoning.
At least they are, but we need training. We need to, and we provide these types of lectures. I drive to Kimberley, I drive to Zululand. We provide this free. I pay my petrol, I pay my accommodation, but it's a drop in the ocean. I see maybe 2,000 doctors a year. It's a drop in the ocean, and it's the rural ones. It's the smaller hospitals where we have the biggest problems. So that also needs to be addressed, and maybe it's something that the National Snakebite Initiative group should start thinking of.
So that was an outstanding talk, and you do wonderful work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I have one hand in the audience from Shannon. I don't know if you want to unmute and just ask your question.
Yes, I want to ask, if you say only have 4 vials and you know you need to give 12, do you just give what you have and then try and source the rest, and as you get it give, or is it just a moot point in giving?
No, you give the 4 vials. You give the 4 vials as we've discussed, and you try and get the patient to more antivenom or more antivenom to the patient as soon as possible.
To still give what you
Absolutely.
can. Okay.
If you have 1 vial, I'm not sure you want to waste your time to give it, because you risk anaphylaxis, and it could be a bigger danger than the benefit you get from 1 vial.
Okay. And it's not based off of weight.
No, very important. Good question. But there's no pediatric dosage. Kids get exactly the same. You're neutralizing the venom. You're not dealing with the adrenaline where you're looking at weights and stuff like that.
Yeah, because I know that was a difficulty. I have a friend who works in Barberton. She's been to a couple, I think it's Snakebite, yeah. So they've had a couple of neonates that have been bitten, and then they struggle to actually get the antivenom into the patient with the volume.
And the same with pregnant women. It's life or limb. They need the antivenom.
Yeah.
Good. Anybody else? Thank you very much. Sorry, Robert.
Not yet, but I'm working on it.
Right. Oh, we've got one more question online. Atandile, do you want to unmute?
Hi there, how are you?
Good, thank you. You can answer.
Good.
You can ask your question.
So I am hearing that you do some outreach programs. I wanted to know if there's a time you'll be visiting any places in Mpumalanga. Just as the doctor mentioned before, we do have a lot of cases. I'm personally in Elukwatini, in Embuleni Hospital. So is there any place where we can reach you and possibly organize something for the whole region that we can actually get a few teachings and trainings? Because we do see
Yes, of course. Drop me an email, or if you can't find me, you just Google Johan Marais. I'll come up first. And you get
humble as well.
You get a group of people together, and I'll come down there with pleasure.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, great. I'm going to put the online part off. Thank you so much for everyone who joined, and we have going to hopefully have availability of the questions and the slides afterwards. So we will share that with everyone as well.
And it gets posted to where they just mentioned.
Yeah. So we are recording as well for our YouTube page. So what I'll do is I'll put that all up tonight or tomorrow morning, and then it can just be distributed to anyone who couldn't make it to the talk. So yeah, thanks everyone who joined.